Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, Bill Cannon. I'm a retired 27-year veteran of the NYPD, retired as a sergeant out of Manhattan North Homicide Squad. And with me tonight is my co-host, straight out of Brooklyn, retired NYPD Detective Phil Grimaldi. How you doing tonight, Phil?
I'm doing pretty good, Billy, and I'm excited to welcome our guest, Chief Boyce, and get on with the show.
Yeah, well, we have a fantastic guest tonight. Retired NYPD Chief of Detectives Robert Boyce, a 35-year veteran. And as I spoke to him early off the air, I realized how many things we had in common besides police work. But we're going to talk tonight about one of the most fascinating homicides, and probably in NYPD history, the murder of Imette St, a John Jay College graduate student. But before I do that, we're going to go to the Police Off the Cuff song, and we'll be right back.
It's a show with two retired detectives that were in the thick of New York crime, fast and hectic. They got some stories and some jokes, even an interview with the most popular folks. Off the cuff, off the cuff. One episode just ain't enough. Get a little laughter and an interview too. It's maybe the best thing you can do.
Welcome back, folks. Chief Robert Boyce, besides being the chief of detectives, is now retired and is an expert talking head on ABC. Correct, Chief?
That's right, Bill. Yes.
And he has a show right now, and maybe you guys have seen it, and it's called New York Homicide on the Oxygen Network. And they actually covered this case, the murder of John Jay College graduate student Imette St. Chief, you want to introduce the preliminary of the case and what actually happened and who Imette St. is?
Sure, Bill. This is probably one of the seminal cases in our history in the NYPD, certainly my time. Out of the 7-5 squad, I was fortunate to work in the 7-5. Two tenures, I should say. Once as a sergeant in the squad and once as the XO downstairs. So I know East New York fairly well, and how hard the detectives work there and how hard the cops work there as well. So in this particular case, it's a terrible homicide of a woman. Her body was deposited on the road. I hate to use the word dump because it's out of reverence for the victim. Her body was placed on the side of the road in a really desolate area on Fountain Avenue, down by Seaview Avenue, and there's really nothing there. But there was a trailer there nearby with someone attending it, and because there was a landfill there, it's the famous Fountain Avenue landfill. And I also knew down there, ironically enough, that was kind of like a mob graveyard for a long time. And we, as the XO there, as a sergeant there, we would find remains of human beings there all the time. So this was something that, as horrible as it was, you see the pictures now of the 7-5 squad in a cold night. This is February 25th, in 2006, again by the side of the road and wrapped up in a blanket. And those blankets are not unusual when you see carpets by the side of the road, things discarded. But this particular thing was the outline of a body. And we had a 911 caller, and that's what started the entire case. Wrapped up clearly with duct tape. And as we unfolded the blanket, it got worse and worse as we got along. But the crime scene unit understood what forensic evidence, how important it is, and how it seems nominal at the time, but it comes back at any different time in the case, and now you're running in that direction. It all falls into line. So great job by crime scene. And the first officer on the scene, Chris DiBernardo, and he's on the show, and he talks about what he encountered there. So a very intense case, very intense show. And it's Sean McTeague and, of course, the great Mark Brooks, who just retired, the first grader, had the case. It had so many cases in the 7-5. So he made a big mistake, the perp. He put the body in the 7-5 and probably called one of the best squads in the city. Kind of dopey. but they got him off the street, and that's important.
Chief, one of the things that is the most important thing in homicide investigation is to get the body identified, to find out who this person is. Because until you find that out, it's really tough to find out victimology. It's tough to establish a timeline. It's tough to establish where did this in fact occur. Because as you said earlier, I know you don't like to use the term, but this appeared to be a dump job, that the murder happened at another location and the body was placed at this location.
Bill, you start with nothing, basically, and there was no ID on her at all. And she was naked. She was stripped naked and wrapped in that thing. So you really had nothing. And you know what we do? We roll the fingerprints and see if we can get an ID that way. And if you don't get it, then you take the hard prints and you take it down. You do it the other way. So this was all happened initially. You really don't know what you have and where it's taking you. Now, one of the detectives, I think it was Chris, said there was a stroll nearby with prostitutes, and I know exactly where it was. It was 7-5 at that time. It's not there anymore, thankfully. We knocked that out. But you really don't know what you don't. The expression is you don't know what you don't know. So with that phone call saying the missing person really helped us and got the case moving quickly. So we were fortunate that this woman was loved and she had friends who missed her, and that's who called, and that's what got the case done. So that expedited the case quite a bit.
So the phone call was from who, Chief?
It was a cousin or a friend. I'm not sure. I don't remember which. But they were worried about her. She hadn't been seen, and she had a large network of friends. And you saw a couple of them on the show. How they're still in pain from the loss of this woman. So that's what helped idea immediately. You can go for, as you know, Bill. You can go for days and weeks and months not identifying the body, and it really stunts the investigation. So we were fortunate that she had so many friends that they called and family, and we got the case going.
Okay, let's take it from there. You got the phone call. Now you know who she is. Now, how long did it take you to establish? You're doing a timeline. Well, one of our friends obviously could cut to the chase. I believe her name was Claire Higgins.
Claire, yeah.
She was with him at St. Guillen the last night she was seen. She was out drinking with her. She saw her at 03:30 hours. I believe on 2/15, 2006, the morning that she was kidnapped and murdered.
Bill, it was her birthday. They were out celebrating. And,
celebrating her birthday, yeah.
Celebrating their birthday on the Lower East Side, down the Bowery area. And going bar hopping. Listen, I've done that a few times myself, and and I understand that. And sometimes it's time to go home. It's time to go home. I think Claire had survivor's guilt. And I understand that too. And she was looking for her the next night in that area. Shows you what kind of sticker she was, and we had to find her. And once we found her, and then you wait on the phone, you wait on the credit card, you wait in those hours, you have to fill in with something. So canvas is what you do it with. And so we knew where she was missing from. We just had to put the pieces together. And that was the hard part. And then you get stunted by people. We talked about him before, Dorian, who wouldn't give us the right information at first. We got past that. It took a little while.
Yeah, this is Daniel Dorian on screen. And if it sounds familiar, it's because his parents owned the bar Dorian's Red Hand up on 60-something Street and on the Upper East Side. And that came into play in 1986 in the Robert Chambers murder of Jennifer Levin. Sort of a weird little tidbit of information, but you can see he doesn't look like the most cooperative type guy, and he had a good reason not to be cooperative. You want to speak upon that a little bit, Chief?
Yeah, he's a saloon keeper. We know them, but there seems to be a black cloud over his head that keeps following him. In Dorian's Red Hand, I was in the 2-4 when that happened, 1986. My friend Mike Sheehan, God bless him, he had the case and he ran with it. So and so here it is, the same family. And so you get a hold of these things and you say, oh my God, I hope lightning doesn't strike twice here, but it looks like it did. Someone who was in that bar and was murdered. So that's where you start. Now you had to get there first. It was a Pioneer bar first, and then you got to the Falls bar, and you start breaking things down. And you start, who's there, who's going to give me information, who's not. And you have different ways. And an investigation, you run like hell towards one way, and you run into a brick wall, and you have to turn around and start someplace else. So we finally got to where we needed to be, which was the Falls bar. And And you look at it afterwards, and Sean was there, and Sean details it really strongly, very well, him and Mark. Great pairing. And they went through the whole thing, and they were able to find out what time she left and what she was drinking. And they got that from a credit card where she was, because Claire had left prior to that at the Pioneer. So we're really at an end, and we found the credit card at the bar, and that's what set it off.
You know, Chief, I had spoken to Sean McTighe, and he, people think like when they watch these cases on television that you're like, let's find the credit card, and you get like you press a button and you get immediate information on all the credit card usage. They don't understand that it takes time and nothing happens very quickly. But Sean told me they got the credit card information back in 2 days, which is very quick.
It is fast. Yeah, it is. Back then, it was faster than, we opened this credit card desk. I don't know if they still have it in the Detective Bureau, but we thought it was so important that you call up and you can get someone with really expertise. We put it in the Grand Law City Division. I don't know if they still have it. I hope they do, because then someone who has it can really expedite the case quickly and get that information. That's how we found the Falls Bar through the credit card.
And he told me she had ordered 2 rum and cokes.
Rum and cokes, exactly right. And it's towards closing time. It's close to 4 o'clock in the morning, and you happens in the street at 4 o'clock in the morning. There's usually some chaos. People leaving. People don't know what want to go out afterwards. So you don't really know where she went at that point. And then we started drilling down on Darryl Littlejohn.
Nothing is more, tough in a homicide case when someone lies to you and makes you do 10 times the amount of work you would have had to do if he had told you the truth. And if Dan Dorian had told you, I told the bouncer to get rid of her. Basically, he said, get her out of the bar. Apparently she was a little intox and maybe she didn't want to leave or whatever. And he told this guy, and that was the last person to see her that she was seen with. That would have really helped you guys a lot. Cut to the chase. And when you figured out who this guy Littlejohn was, it wouldn't be too difficult to put 2 and 2 together.
Well, he ran a pretty good con at first, Bill, if you remember. You deal with these guys. They're psychopaths. They're good con men. So he says, con, no, I don't know what happened. I just walked her out the door. Once we got to him, and all of a sudden we found a homeless person outside. He says, no, I saw a dispute. And then all of a sudden, let's run Littlejohn. And then, you go back and you run him and say, oh my God, we got a bad guy on the line here on parole. Shouldn't have been in the bar to begin with. And that changed things in Imette law afterwards, which was a good thing too. So he had a bunch of different names. Wasn't a big fellow for a bouncer, that's for sure. But he had a hard look to him. And again, that's when the really race started right then. Let's find out all about this guy.
He had that cell block D look,
Yeah.
that he had walked up and down the tier.
Yeah. Well, he was going back. He's there now. So it's so now all of a sudden it starts to come. You see real evil. You see it in his eyes when you start talking. The guy stinks when you talk to him. He's no good. And then and so now you go into his phone. He asks him for his phone. He gives it to you. And then you start doing that. And you I don't know if we had CODIS back then in 2006. I don't remember when we started CODIS with DNA. It became really irrelevant if his DNA profile was on was on file. I don't know, but I don't remember. But once we got all that down, then all of a sudden it was just like cat and mouse for us to figure it all out and find out his house. But that crime scene in his house was really something. You saw the pictures.
What's amazing, Chief, is like people don't understand circumstantial evidence, and basically means from which inferences are drawn. And when you pile up circumstantial evidence on top of each other, it becomes very, very powerful. And I know we could talk about some of the circumstantial evidence, the cell phone hits, which was so important in this case, putting him right near that where the body was dumped, putting him in that van, driving along, I think, the Belt Parkway, all of these things that come together. And then, of course, I think they found blood on the ties that were around her wrists. His blood.
You know what the story with that, Bill, was? They found his blood.
His blood.
Right.
He was a nosebleeder. And we believe at the time when he tied off the legs of that, when he put it there, he bent down, he started nosebleeding. That's what we think. That's where he came from. Because when we talked to people around afterwards, they said, no, he was a nosebleeder. Had a real problem with it. So that's what we thought. Because she was, you saw how she was murdered. she's asphyxiated with a sock in her mouth, and they
Right.
typed up her body. So back then, I think it was Chris or Sean said they saw the fibers, and all of a sudden, well, we'll get back to that later, but right, that's important to make note of. You know, the hairbrush that was nearby, again, it helped us a lot. That touched DNA. These were terms back in 06 that we were just learning about. Ping and phone pings, all these things. So it really was, like I said, it was a major case back then, and it really set us out going forward. Here you had this. It was clearly it was the outline of a woman. So if you were driving by, that fella called. But it was, I'll tell you, if you know anything about the 7.5, it's way down the end. And back in that time, it was February. There was nobody out there.
Right.
And we got
But
lucky.
even on this blanket she's covered with, we discussed it off the air also, there was forensic evidence on this. There was semen from his brother who had passed away in 1994. So it was over 10 years old. As you said earlier, they never washed the blanket. I think the mother had a rabbit hair coat in a closet. And I believe there was rabbit hairs on this blanket as well as a hair from the mother. And then I think his DNA or that brush had his DNA on it. So all this stuff, this fiber evidence, this microscopic evidence was all so hugely important to building a case against this savage.
Yeah, well, there has that transfer of evidence that we talk about, little Kurd's law that goes back into the 1800s, for crying out loud, that any time a crime is committed, there's always a transference of evidence that goes forward. And whoever comes to a crime scene leaves it, and he leaves something from that crime scene with him. So you look at these things and you're trying to figure things out. Once we got to the house, once we saw the van, go into the house, see the red fibers, see the red carpet, it all started adding up really, really quickly. We'd put him away in jail on a parole violation, get him off the scene because he is going to kill somebody again. And we'll go into that in a few minutes. So this is like a really dangerous guy. And I had them when I was chief of D in the same precinct, and I'll talk about that later. I had a case just that you have to get that guy off the street. He's a murderer. So they put him off the street, put him in Rikers, and now we can work the case, and people will start talking to us knowing he's away. And that's pretty much what happened. The fibers, the blood, the DNA, all those things, and that you can recover and turn them into evidence and lock that door. And that's what happened there. There was no eyeball here. So it was a forensic rich case, and that's how you have to run with it.
Yeah, it's an amazing. Phil, you got anything?
Yes. First, I want to congratulate you, Chief, on New York Homicide, because I've been watching it from the first episode. I think it's up to about episode 12 or 13 now, and I think I've been getting a lot of good feedback from other colleagues and just civilians as well. Very good show. Lots of luck with it. I we worked a little together on that on the L&B case, Louis Barbati case. But looking at the crime scene, the pictures that Bill showed in the beginning, as the detective, you got a body, like you said, placed in that location, and when you first get there, unidentified, no wallet, no identifying clothing. Basically, what we would refer to that as a bag of shit case. So when you're standing there in the first minutes or hours of the investigation, you're really kind of scratching your head. But then, like you said, as the things start to unravel, those red fibers, I'm sure that became noted right away. And then whatever DNA examination was done off the blanket, the phone records, the credit card, getting her identified, those were all steps that, all the pieces were building, and it led to Darryl Littlejohn. Now, the fact that the owner of the bar gave you guys a, sort of put you in a different direction. How badly do you think that stymied the investigation or put it off? I mean, obviously we led to the arrest of Darryl Littlejohn, but did it stall you guys in any way?
It did stall a bit, but there's nothing you can't overcome. And all of a sudden he shows up at headquarters with a lawyer and wants to talk to us. So then all of a sudden you come clean. But you were at that point, we were moving in the right direction, and he actually blamed Dorian for the murder, if you remember, at the trial.
Right,
so,
that was his defense in at the trial.
Yeah, not much of a defense. And in this case was a media storm. If you remember that, it was crazy. It was in the papers every day. There was people afraid to take a cab home from a bar at night, or it's one of those cases like I had Karina Vetrano in the 106 in 2016. It changed people's lives because they were afraid to go out and do what they wanted to do now. So it was that type of thing, a media storm. And by the way, we just got the word for second season on the show. So
that's great.
We're happy about that. And I think what the show shows, what it does display is the hard work of the detectives and the symbiotic relationship between the family and the detectives. And that's where you came in. You just did it masterfully on the L&B Smoking Gardens case, and how close you get with them and how important they are to drive you to the next level, because you get tired of these things. I don't have to tell you one body, and you don't go home for a couple of days, and when you do, it's for a couple of hours. And next thing you know, you're back at work, and you're right at it again. So, and some of the detectives I remember really well from Brooklyn North Homicide, and we had Sean, and we had Mark and Chris, but there were others who worked the case as well, who I know are really fine detectives, and a lot of work went into the case. And in the middle of it was a front page case for a long time, and it was a tough case. It was a tough case.
Yeah, absolutely, folks. This is Police Off the Stories. If you like this show, please go on our YouTube, hit the subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, ring that bell. If you want to support us financially, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels. And if you want to join our YouTube family, we have 5 different levels. You can support us on YouTube, be a member of the Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories family. Lee Perry, thank you so much for the $9.99 super sticker. Aaron Rodriguez, a new member. Aaron, you've been supporting us for a while, and I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I just want to mention the chief was talking about how emotionally you get involved in these cases, and that's for sure. In homicide, we always talk about a real homicide. And look, every victim is a real victim, but this person was a graduate student. She was killed by a stranger, and it really hits you. And it's one of those, when you get a homicide like that, you don't want to go home until it's solved. It's something keeping you at work, and you don't care if you don't get any sleep. I've been up on cases 30, 35, 40 hours. And, I was in Connecticut one time, and I was up for 35 hours. 2 detectives from Connecticut State Police said to me, "What's that detective's name?" And I knew him for 10 years. I was so tired, I couldn't remember his name. And I was like, this is crazy, Your
brain turns to oatmeal after a while. You just, and you need that sleep desperately. And but even when you're home and you work in the cases,
exactly,
it's in your head. And even when you're with your kids or your family, something like that, sneaks into your head, and you start thinking, what I got to do. So it really is. It's a great calling, but it's not. It's a grind. It's not an easy life.
Chief, in 1993, I had a 4-perp homicide. I went to work on a Wednesday afternoon. We had caught the case on the weekend, and on Wednesday, I went to work for 4 to 1. And first perp collared, went through the night. Thursday, second perp turned himself in, gave information on the third perp. Friday, when I came back from Central Book, and now I'm up already 2 days, guys from the homicide squad in my office said, "Listen, if you want to go home, we'll go out. We'll go searching for this other guy." I couldn't. I knew if I went home, I wasn't going to sleep. Third perp captured and went through the night. I didn't get home till Saturday morning from Wednesday. So again, I wasn't going to, go home and get any rest. I knew that those other perps were still outstanding. So
really, you didn't want anybody else to get them, but you too.
Exactly.
You want to be there too for that. That's what drove me all these years too. I wanted to be there when it happened.
Exactly. You don't want to miss it. And Bill, you were talking about that. You couldn't remember the guy's name. By Friday night, I was in the DA's office trying to give the story to the DA. And in between, when she would turn to the computer and start typing, I was actually falling asleep in the chair. So, but you want to know something? It felt good. We took 4 bad guys off the street. That was the Kiki case. I did it with you, Bill. It was a drug dealer that was murdered. They thought he was turned out he was an informant for the ATF and all of that. But it was a good case. A 4th perp was captured about a month later down at parole. So, and again, you get so personally involved in these things that you can't. You breathe it, you sleep it, you drink it. It stays with you till the bad guys are in jail.
Especially,
Chief, I just want to mention that with this case too. Here's a girl, 2 girls go out drinking. One of them goes home. This girl is out drinking, and she's a victim of a horrible crime. Everyone else in New York City now is wondering, could that happen to me? And then when it comes out that it was the bouncer, and there's an industry, of course, that has no regulation whatsoever, and perhaps this case made the state regulate the club security business, because here's this guy, Danny Dorian, hires a career criminal to be his bouncer. I mean, what's wrong with that picture, you know?
No, if you remember, we had to, after that, they had to be printed, they had to be run, and we had to know who they were. So it changed dramatically. And then we had to have ID, people coming in the clubs and everything. So it really changed the club scene in New York for a while anyway, especially down that end. Because that end wasn't completely gentrified for a long time. At night, we all know what the city's like at 4 o'clock in the morning. We've been out there. And so
Right.
it's not the same place at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And so
Absolutely.
we have to put some structure in that chaos that we have down there, and anywhere in the city, but mostly in the lower Manhattan where all the young people go.
You know, that was a brilliant idea that came out of it, though, is when people go into clubs, they scan their license.
Yep, scan it right
Because
there.
then if there's a crime in the club or a shooting, you have every single person that was there, you know, with their identification was taken by the club. That was a great
It was a great
security
move.
thing.
It really was. And I had Manhattan detectives for a while, and I know how important that was in solving our crimes there. Because you know, some people pulls out a gun and starts shooting the place up, and they had on video. It was really video really came into clubs at that point too. So it was a game changer. And I always say this victim did not die in vain. She changed the city, how we go in business. So that's Imette St for you. Her loss was a terrible loss, but she created change in doing so. Even with the,
Absolutely. I mean, you see some of those clubs in Chelsea. Some of them, you don't realize it. Thousands of people can fit in those clubs. 2,000-3,000 people.
Yeah, we did one of the shows on Joe Community Alley, a great kid from Connecticut, and one of the first show we did actually. It was against the 17th precinct. He was murdered, and it was a tough road to hoe on that one too. But the detectives and the family did a really good job in helping us get to that doorstep and helping all of his friends. So it can be dangerous. And at 4 o'clock in the morning down that was in a different part of lower Manhattan. It's a mess down there at 4 o'clock in the morning. There's people all over the place.
Yeah, it is a mess. You know, Chief, I want to get back to Littlejohn and who he is and who he was. And one of the things that people don't realize is that putting him on ice, so to speak, putting him in Rikers Island while you guys worked the case, A, it gave you time to work the case, and B, the publicity for this case actually drew another victim out of the woodwork that was kidnapped by Littlejohn. And they were able to try her case prior to the Imette St case, and he was convicted and got 25 to life on that case before you ever even tried the Imette St case.
Yeah, it was important to do that as well. It's really, she saved her own life when she kicked that door open and got out of that car. We found her DNA in the car, by the way. And so and she was cuffed in it as well. So that it was a strong case all the way around. When we recovered that van on the Imette St case, that young lady's DNA was in the van. So that was a great recovery by crime scene. I can't tell you how important crime scene unit is to us in the Detective Bureau. They solved all my major cases that I had as chief of day. So kudos to them, as well as the hardworking detectives who don't go home and sleep, like we talked about before. So it's a team effort. I always say not one person solves a murder, solves a crime. There's a whole bunch of us.
You know, Chief, we do nothing but praise the NYPD crime scene unit on this case, because people always say, oh, the FBI. We shut up with the FBI. The NYPD crime scene unit is as good or better than the FBI forensic team, because they work much harder. They work on way more cases.
I tell you what, I had a case where one of the terrorists blew up 23rd Street in September of 2016. 2016 was a ridiculous year for us.
Yeah.
Especially in my time. It was just, we had murders all over the place. And it really was. And after that, everything changed. 2017, the numbers were way down. But we worked with the FBI crime scene as well. And on that explosion, he set off a pressure cooker bomb. We were able to collect it. We worked hand in glove. It was really well. It was great. We had some really talented people out there, and we needed it. And we had that terrorist ID'd 8 hours later. And that's how good that case worked hand in glove with our federal partners. Really worked well.
And that's the same guy that shot the Jersey City cop, I think, right?
Khan Rahimi. That's exactly right.
Linden, I believe they got him in Linden, New Jersey. He was.
They did. And it was funny because I was talking to John Miller about it. I said, "We'll get this guy." I said, "We'll lock him up." He goes, "Bob, he's going to flame out. He's going to flame out. He's not a perp. He's a terrorist. It's a different thing." John was exactly right. The guy was sleeping he had no plan B. He was sleeping in some near some bar or restaurant in the closed spot, and he just pulled us. I think we put the police department put like 12 or 13 rounds in him. He's still Well, he's out in Florence, Colorado right now. We'll see him anytime soon.
I knew the actual cop that my family owns a factory in Linden, and they have some security from the Linden police, and they knew the cop. He used to come in there and do security for them, and he just went over, like you said, to wake him up, a guy sleeping in the doorway, and the terrorist just whipped out the gun, started shooting, and it was like a run and gun battle, I believe. But thank God the good guys won on that one. I believe the officer was shot, but not seriously injured. If I'm
no, I think he actually winged another cop too on that shootout. We had him ID'd by the time. Bill Sweeney was the assistant director in New York at the time. I met him that night for the first time. He just got to New York, and we said, "Let's work this together. It's going your way, Bill." But Bill Sweeney, but I'm going to be right next to you. We got to get this done because we got to talk to this mayor every 5 minutes. So and we did, and we had his picture. Here's your guy, and he goes, and he already had all perps make mistakes. You got to find the mistakes. And this particular perp on the bomb that didn't go off on 27th Street, he left his fingerprint on it. So that's how we nailed him. They make mistakes all the time. You got to find the mistake. Yeah, and so we were on him at that point.
Chief, the FBI was actually very, very helpful working along with the NYPD in the L&B case. I mean, they did stuff that would have taken the NYPD, money-wise, and, dumping cell phone towers and all the surveillance they did. They really did a lot of work on that case. Again, our crime scene obviously has much more experience. There's, many more cases that our guys respond to than their guys. So there's a point to be made what Bill said. But when you get cooperation with them, they really they did a lot of good work on that case.
Yeah, I'm not putting down the FBI crime scene. I'm just saying ours is just as good or better because they
do have a big and Quantico.
Their lab,
they have data crunching, Billy, that we don't have.
Right.
I had a case in Southeast Queens where they were trying to kill a cop, and a bomb went off. It was a homemade bomb, and it killed the individual who opened it, the man who lived there. And they were actually trying to kill a police officer in 6-7 at the time. And that data crunching that they have, that ability, helped me solve the case. So it's a great pairing. And I said, we opened up a lot of task forces that we never had before under Bill Bratton, because he just said, Bob, you do what you want, and you open up as many as you can. And we did. I think I opened like 10 or 11. It was a lot.
That's great.
It was a lot.
I want to play a little bit of this. I interviewed Sean McTighe about a year ago. And I just want to play a little bit of this.
Sean puts him at the very least dumping the body, right?
Absolutely. And some of this evidence, even though it doesn't directly, what we call it is circumstantial evidence. But when you have a huge amount of circumstantial evidence, it becomes very, very powerful. Very powerful.
So now in the tape that was around her face, there was carpet fibers from his house and mink and rabbit hair. So on the collars of winter jackets, there'd be a fur collar. This particular specific hair was found that was from his house in his closet back on the body. So that means now we know that she was at his house at some point.
And that's all that stuff is called for us people that are crime buffs. It's evidence linkage and cross contamination. Correct. Whereas it's powerful to have his evidence on her, but it's also very powerful to have her evidence in his house, which is just very, very powerful. As you know, Sean, let me just again shout out to some of our Locard's theory of exchange, which you were alluding to before, Chief. And it's so, again, like we're talking about, her evidence, physical evidence, is in his house. I mean, how did that happen?
Two crime scenes matched together. It really made the case there. And Sean was great. At the end of it, he said this was a highlight of his career when you put a real bad guy away. And that's what he did. He solved the tough one.
Yeah, well, 100%. And this guy, when you just even look at this guy, you can see evil is written all over this guy's face. And this is why we're cops. A guy like him.
Yes, and that's why society needs this, Bill.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like the trend in the criminal justice system is like bailing and paroling guys like this, and I don't think they really understand who these people are. They see it in a much different way than we do.
Yeah, and a friend of mine, retired chief, called me and he says, we were talking for a while, and he says, we're scarred for life. I said, why? Because we look at life different than everybody else in the world. We see danger when it's, when no one else sees it. We see threats.
How true.
That's just the way we, we didn't even sign on for that. It just became us, at some point that we see things that others don't, in society. And you're right. We see these individuals getting out now that it's a threat to society, and we're just going to keep locking them up, because I tell you what, there are some people who are just incorrigible. And it's a small number in society, but nonetheless, they're just incorrigible people, and they're just going to keep committing crimes, and they think in a warped way. This guy was real evil. Evil, even in our business, is rare. Is rare. That is real evil right there. We just see idiots who most of the time will get arrested. Sometimes they jump in the car. It's so easy. But it's in this particular person, he was a true predator, and we were fortunate to put him away before he hurt anybody else.
Chief, a lot of times in my career, I would, like you said, there'd be like, let's say, a fight, a drug fight, a bar fight or something. Somebody got murdered. You make the collar, and the person, they were bad, but they weren't really evil. But I've looked into the eyes of evil a few times, and I tell people I actually met the devil. When you have a guy confessing to you, talking about a murder like it's, picking up a tissue off the floor or something. And, it's really, really, you look at Darryl Littlejohn, that other young lady probably was going to meet the same fate as Imette St had she not jumped out of that van. And that brings me to this, Chief. Is there a possibility that there were other cases that this guy may have been involved in? I'm sure that was looked at. Is there any chance that there were other cases?
So that goes across the city. Everybody knows about it. We put out bulletins. We train our officers to look for anything else. So if someone has an open case of this guy down that area, then we take a look at it. From what I know, there was one other case. He was never prosecuted that we're able to link to this fella because she couldn't make the ID. It's as simple as that. She couldn't put him in. So it was one other case we know he did. So it was 3 altogether. We think he did it, but we couldn't. The prosecutor wouldn't go forward with it. So at least 3. One murder.
When you look back at 2006, and you alluded to it before, we've come so far in 16 years in regards to evidence and technology, some of the tools that we have now. And I saw that you spoke on ABC News about technology in regards to law enforcement. And it seems every time we get something new, one of these groups tries to take it away from us. Like the ACLU, they want to get rid of facial recognition. Shot Spotter is that's also racially based. Everything we get that helps law enforcement.
I'd like to explain that one though, Billy. That Shot Spotter.
I don't understand how that's racially based. I don't know.
Unbelievable.
It's funny. Shot Spotter saves lives, by the way. And I'm a Brownsville, East New York guy, and that's where I did a lot of my career. And some of those, in those neighborhoods, just from apathy, they don't even call when the shot's going off. But we collect that brass on the rooftops or wherever it happens and put it into a system. We're able to do linkage, what we talked before, and link it to other crimes. I solved a crime one time they shot a New York Knick in a strip club in Queens. Because we hooked it up to another place in Sumner houses in Brooklyn, we were able to figure out who did it and made the collars. Those things are all important. So abandonment DNA bill is what I think you were talking about. They want to take that away. I'm pushing back on that. It's one of those things that we have to have. And with science, it's funny with science. It's no bias in it. There's no human error in it. It is what it is. Science on a forensic discipline. It is what it is. And it's the same thing with one of the cases I had in Queens with Karina Vetrano. They're trying to saying he's innocent. No, he's not innocent. Because, when you put out information, you keep qualifying information back to the press. So in this particular case, we kept a few things back. That perp told us that in the interview room, exactly what happened. So we never put that out. He couldn't have gotten that from anyone else, but the fact that he was there. So these are important things we do. And you're right. And one of the things in the show, I don't know if you saw Murder at the Met.
Yes.
1980. It was a great show, Manhattan North Detectives. And Mike Struck was quite a character on the show. And Jerry Giorgio has since passed, so I didn't get a chance to talk to him. But Mike, he had none of that. They had none of that.
Right.
Yeah, he really just old-time skills, how good you are in the box, and the fact that they really had a sketch of the perp that changed everything on that case. He looked just like one of the workers in the place. Right. Just got out of jail, that guy too, by the way. After doing like 35, 40 years. But that perp, because he was the sketch was that good, other workers there, stagehands, gave him up and said, "Hey, that's your guy." And then we put him in the box and he gave it up. And that's how the thing got solved. But knowing that back then, they had nothing like we have today.
Yeah, you wonder how they solved cases back then without video footage, cell phone footage, and there's video everywhere now. How did they do that?
Indulge me for a minute. There's a guy in East New York who just beheaded a woman and just threw the body out in the street just 2 weeks ago. That same perp, I had a job when I was a 2-4 cop. I was the first on the scene. He'd killed someone else in the same fashion, a similar fashion. And I go to the scene. I said, well, then now we got to solve this. This woman's in a bag at Central Park. Would have been a big story now. Was kind of like a side story back then. And this is like 80, 85 now. And I'm fairly new on the job. I come in the next day to identify the body because it was my job down at the OCME. And I go to the desk and the sergeant says, yeah, go upstairs. Squad solved that already. What? I ran upstairs and I found a 40-year detective on the team, walked me through the whole thing, and I was hooked at that point. As far as detective work, I was hooked. And it's the same perp. He gets out on parole and he murders another woman. It's his third woman he murdered.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Unbelievable.
It's crazy.
There's an argument for parole, wouldn't you say?
Well, you know what? It's we see it all the time. This guy who killed 2 of our officers way back when is speaking at a college now. It bothers me.
Unbelievable.
It bothers me.
Oh, Bottoms. Yeah.
There's nothing he can share that we need to know.
Waverly Jones and the Argentine.
Tony Argentina, yeah. It was a horrible time, and I wasn't on the job for that, but I've talked to many officers who were, and they were walking around looking at watching each other's backs left and right. It was a tough time. We've had tough times too, but they were really under the gun at that point.
Eddie Hartnett wrote a great letter to the president. I think it's of, is it Brockport, the school he's going to speak at? He wrote a letter saying he was a cop in the 3-2 right after that or during that. And, basically in very eloquent language, he told her, this is ridiculous. He's not a political prisoner. He's a murderer,
If you know the circumstances of the homicide, it's even worse when you hear it, how he executed him, how he emptied his gun into him. And so it's that bad. And then and now this seems to happen. Terrorists get out, they get jobs, they teach in school, the professors, crazy.
Columbia University has what's her name, the one from the Nyack murder, Bowden. She teaches at Columbia, and her husband just recently got paroled, and their son is a San Francisco DA.
That's right.
It's just, you can't make this stuff up. It's unbelievable. The other day, Phil and I were watching Tiffany Caban, who's from Queens.
Yeah.
She's outrageous. I mean, first of all, I can't believe how stupid she is. Yeah. And she claims with no proof at all, violence interrupters have lowered shootings or lowered murders 80%. Right. And I was like, where'd she get that from? Where did that statistic come from?
It's an arbitrary number they just put out. It doesn't make any sense. It can't be sourced in any way. Listen, and they're paying. All those are ex-gang members, by the way. It is what it is. It's not something you can ever quantify. What that whole program. It was done under de Blasio.
Yeah, well, what it is, Chief, is just a money grab, and it's redistributing wealth to people that are criminals that can't get a job. So let's give them free money because the only thing they know how to do is gangbang, and let's act like they have some kind of skill. They're social workers now.
Yeah, giving them way too much credit. But that's what it is. So you have radical politicians, and they really ruined the city. We have this one person, I can't remember his name right now, is still defending bail reform. Are you out of your mind? Everybody knows it's failed and failed mightily, and it's not even willing to tweak it. And it doesn't make any sense to me. This is not my city anymore. I look back and I got out in 2018, and the numbers were really low. And we understood that no more of the things we were doing, suppression policing. We understood all those things. We got into precision policing. Maybe 7,000 or 8,000 of the real hardcore people we got to keep in. But they're letting burglaries out, career burglars, just getting right back out again. And there's no stopping on it. And it just keeps going and going. Car thieves all over the place. So
they had a bank robbery, robbed the same bank 4 times, bailed 4 times. I mean, come on, it just doesn't end. And he passed the note, this and that. Doesn't matter. The person that's he's robbing takes years off their life. They don't think about the victims anymore. That's a lot of these focuses are not on the victims. And that Caban that Bill just brought up, she was on a Zoom call yesterday, I believe it was. City Council was like having some discussions about the broken windows policy. They're pushing back on it, saying that it targets just minorities, and they came out with these numbers. 90% of the 1,500 people that were arrested were from the minority community on broken windows policy type violations. They cited urinating in public, jumping in turnstile, and having a driver's license. That I guess you don't need a driver's license to drive in New York City. You know what they're saying, according to what they're saying, that's affecting the minority community, and they're really pushing back on the broken windows policy that Sewell and Adams are trying to implement again. It looks like they're going in the right direction. I mean, they started this what they call modified anti-crime unit. They're calling it a gun unit, gun suppression unit, whatever it is. They are trying, but they're getting tremendous pushback from Jumaane Williams and a lot of people in the city council and this caban. So we know it works. We lived through it in the 80s and the 90s. We saw the reductions in crime based on broken windows policy type policing. And, they're trying to do that. But like you said, Chief, we lost our city. It's not a city anymore. It's like a revolving door justice. There's no fear at all for these gangbangers to carry guns. They're all carrying. They'll whip them out and start shooting. I mean, a 3-year-old shot the other day coming out of a daycare. I mean, we could go on and on. There's just so many shootings and the violence. And then they want to have convicted gangbanger felons as violence interrupters that are supposedly going to stem violence. No, they're going to get in the way of criminal investigation. That's what they're going to do. Police try to make an arrest. They're going to get in the middle of it, and they're just going to, impede an arrest situation. So, Billy,
so the head blood in Brooklyn now. At one time, I was CEO of the gang division before, and I knew every head of every gang there was. He is now a violence interrupter. Come on now.
There you go.
It just keeps going. Listen, we're all veterans. We know this isn't the 80s and the 90s yet. We know that, but it's fallen back. I mean, you remember in the early 90s with crack. It was just really a tough time to be a cop. But I tell you, I always was excited by the job. I always liked it. I always couldn't wait to get to work because every day was a different day. And
I say that all the time. It's absolutely true.
I just couldn't wait to get to work. And I always worked in challenging neighborhoods. Didn't bother me at all. And I just wanted to get there and because the night went like that. Once you got there. But it's not that yet. But hopefully that'll stop. And I'll tell you what, I still talk to people in the precincts I worked in, the 7-5 to 6-7 calls me all the time. Great community there. They want this. They want us to be the police again. They really do. It's just outside noise, if you will, that's stopping us from doing it. And listen, I met the PC the other day. She was great, and I have full confidence in her. And she's a great person. I think she's exactly what we need right now.
The only problem, Chief, is that a very small group of people hold a lot of power, and the state and the New York City Council, they both don't want bail reform, and they really have to be removed. That's the only thing you could say is they need to be removed, because Tiffany Caban was almost the Queens District Attorney. By a hair. She was almost the Queens District. And look at Bragg. Bragg walked it back after he almost got fired before he had his job. He went in there with a full Soros menu.
Judge Brown was one of my favorite DAs too, and to see that office turn like that, and there was some great prosecutors in the Queens DA office. Thank God she didn't get it, But so it is what it is. This is the new life we're living in, and it's not fair. I live in the city. I walk about. I see the changes. Again, it's not the 80s yet. It's not the early 90s yet. But we don't want to go back to that time because just too many lives were lost. And it's just, and again, my heart's always with people in the 7-3, 7-5, 6-7. That's where I work. The South Bronx. Still talk to those people as well. I don't want this going back because their lives matter to me. That's those communities. Those cops who work there matter to me. So I really hoping that things change for the better. I really do.
It seems like we're going down that track, but like you said, it might not be that bad right now. I mean, if you think back, you couldn't walk in Times Square in the late 80s, early 90s. And then when things got better, I took my family when my kids were small and it was great. Plenty of cops around. Everybody was having a good time. Now you got to dodge bullets. You go to Times Square. It's crazy. It's insane.
It's listen, unless you do something with those folks, those peddlers there, it's going to keep getting worse. I don't get it because this could easily be resolved there in Times Square, but they won't.
Well, Chief, the guy who shot the 3 people was shooting at his brother.
Right.
That's crazy, right?
And that was an argument over they were peddling stuff. They were arguing over CDs or whatever it was, and he shot 3 people.
And that's perfectly evidence of how quality of life enforcement would have stopped the shooting.
Those are all scams. Everything they're selling is
Yeah,
yeah.
It really is. It's so ridiculous that we're even having this conversation because this, put Tom Patel on it, bring him back, and have him address it, and we'll be gone the next day. We wouldn't have this problem.
But they want to take those those tools away. I mean, the biggest tool I think they took away that helped the most was having jumping the turnstile be a misdemeanor, and when then they changed it to a civil matter, it's like people have license to just jump the turnstile now.
Yeah, it was an erosion of our quality of life in this city, and I saw it coming when I was still on the job. They wanted to forgive summonses, criminal court summonses from a certain time back. I saw this coming through Mock J at the time under the de Blasio administration, and it was just they were running too much of the city, had too much power, and they were changing things left and right. I couldn't lock up a guy who shot on a warrant, even though he had a warrant. I couldn't put him in cuffs. Try to get some leverage on him to get him to tell me who did it, and it got that bad. It was just like we pushed back. And so I look back when I left, we were, in 18, the city was in great shape, but then Floyd, and then everything changed after that. So,
Right.
But 14 was a tough year too, tough summer. We had a lot of protests, and we had a tough time with that as well. And we had the 2 officers shot, Wen Jin Lu and Ralphie Ramos, and they were murdered because of this. And I will always say that it's not talked about enough. That the person who murdered him, Brimsley, sought them out and looked to commit a homicide of two of our cops, and it's because of the rhetoric that went out. So reckless speech matters when they say these things, when politicians say things, and it burns me to know those two great men are dead now because of that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's even like, Chief, when you were talking about bail reform before, the police department put out statistics, real statistics on how bail reform is hurting the city. And I've seen the New York Times write, there is no evidence. This was their sentence. There's no evidence that bail reform has caused the rise in crime. What are they reading, or what are they listening to where they just invented that? They love that line too. There is no evidence. The New York Times, I see, uses that practically every day.
Well, you know what? They always say no empirical evidence. They always say. Let me tell you something. It's an altruistic thing to lower pretrial detainees. I understand that, but you have to do it with common sense. And they didn't consult any of us on this at all. So it's had they known, they would have known that burglars are fed by drugs, they're fed by heroin, they break into things, and you just can't keep letting them out. Otherwise, you get more and more crime. It's as simple as that. Same thing with car thieves. The GLA numbers are through the roof. We had this licked. It was stunned. The car thefts were way below. Now it's all back. Someone just stole a catalytic converter in my street where I live. It's like 2 weeks ago.
I saw for February, GLAs are up 104.7% for the month of February.
Crazy.
And overall crime is up just shy of 59% in the 7 majors.
Now those were, and I don't want to take off Kenny Corby. We just talked about this the other day. He said we are going against low numbers, Chief Bob, and I said, yeah, I know we are. But I think he's a great man. He's actually the person to do it, to get the thing turned around. The people there in place, the PC, Corey, it's all good. Jimmy Essig is a great chief of detectives. We can get this done. We just need the political will to get it done. That's the issue.
Chief, I say it every time. There's 3 components to the criminal justice system: the police, corrections, and courts. If all 3 aren't on the same page, it ain't happening.
It's a mess. Yeah, it's a mess. And so am I an optimist? I am. I hope we get our city back. I really do. To the levels that we saw, probably not, but hopefully close to it. That's what I'm hoping for. And listen, I always say, thank God for the NYPD detective, because they're the unsung heroes in this city. They do a great job. You see a heinous crime, and the next day you see the perp walk. Come on, man. They do it time and time.
Absolutely, Chief.
Well, because and the public expects it. They
do,
expect
I don't know if everybody appreciates it. I think folks do.
Yeah.
They don't realize the work that goes into that. You just drop your life for 2 days, and then you chase this guy. The maniac who stabbed that woman in Queens going into the subway 9 times or something like that. They had him less than 10 hours later. That takes a lot of work where you don't sleep and you just keep going. So this is great work, and it has to be told how good they are, what's going on in the city. So
100%.
That's what the show's all about. That's what I'm going to be about next season as well. This is, and it's fun to watch. It's fun to watch them figure these things out as you go forward.
Folks, Chief Boyce is referring to the show NYPD Homicide on the Oxygen Network. He just informed us that they got a second season. I hope he consults Phil and I, who were the stars of Police Off the Cuff, to come on the show.
We met on The Perfect Murder.
That's right.
An
We
open
met on
invitation. With Philly, with L&B Smokey Gardens, we had you and two other great Brooklyn, Vinny DiDonato and Jimmy. I mean, it was. We were actually going to subtitle you. The Brooklynese was so heavy on that show. Well, it was great. It was a great tale, and we brought justice for the family, a great New York family. To the
Listen, Chief, you don't know how much justice you brought, because there's been several rumors, stories on TV, the organized crime, heroin, all these different things, and you put all of that to rest, that there was no organized crime relation to the murder itself, as well as to the family, the L&B Smokey Gardens family. So they were very happy with that. That, listen, they've run in a business for over 80 years, and all the rumor and innuendo. We got to tip our hat to you and to the great work of the NYPD.
It's all about the detectives who do the work. It's not me. I'll tell you one thing about that case. We knew who the perp was about 4 days into it. We knew we had phone calls. We were on him right off the bat, but we had to do a lot of work. We had to get his phone. He was a bad murderer too. He was a terrible guy. But he left so many things that he put it together. But we had to clear up that silly mob business,
Right.
But I was driving home every night, and I would say it's a botched robbery on the press conferences, and two guys on the radio, QB and Curtis. Boyce is an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And I'm hearing this, and my guy's driving me. They elbow me and stuff like that. You should call right now. I said, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to feed this nonsense. But they didn't know what they were talking about, actually. It wasn't.
Sleewer actually had an argument with Arthur Idala, who does the show, and Sleewer was making comments. Oh yeah, the source, the gangsters, and Arthur Idala knows the victim very well, and said, "Listen, you're wrong. The guy was behind the counter making heroes his whole life, and he wasn't a bad guy. You got it wrong." No, and they actually had like almost an argument, So we're glad that was all cleared up. I actually got the call on the perp. They made a call into L&B, and then the family called me and said, "Listen, somebody gave this name." I gave it to the detectives, and 20 minutes later, he called me back and said, "Phil, this is the guy. He's got the car registered in his name," and everything just went from there, which was great. Like you said, it was amateur night for this guy, because he made a million mistakes. Most of the whole situation was caught on videotape and cameras around the area, and then the cell phone technology, and on it went. So, but he got his just deserved, convicted. I got to mention Emily Dean on that case was the prosecutor. She now works for the U.S. Attorney's Office. She did some tremendous open, and her summation was tremendous. She talked for almost 2 hours without even looking at a note, had places, times. So there was a great team effort. NYPD, U.S. Attorney's Office, FBI. That was a great case. And the show that you did on it did the case very much justice. It was excellent.
Phil, we got to go to a quick break.
Sure. Joe Murray, attorney at law. Have you found yourself in a jam? Are you in need of legal counsel in the New York area? Do you need a victim's advocate? Well, Joe Murray is your man. He's not only an experienced trial attorney, he's also a retired 15-year member of the NYPD. He literally knows both sides of defense. His website is jmurray-law.com. His telephone number is 646-838-1702, or you could email Joe at jmurray-law.com.
The secret to quickly hiring the best police officers before your competition does. With an extremely limited job candidate pool, law enforcement agencies have to quickly identify and hire qualified police officers before another agency does. That's why nearly 70 U.S. agencies have updated their hiring process to include iDetect, a fast, affordable, non-invasive, unbiased, and automated lie detector. It accurately identifies lies by watching the eyes. iDetect also helps solve crimes. We had Conversa CEO Todd Mickelson, and he shared stories about how iDetect is changing the way the world detects deception. Remember, the eyes don't lie. Conversa.com, 1-801-331-8840, and you can email them at info@conversa.com. New technology, Chief. They're saying they're just as good as a lie detector test, and they just read the pupils of the eyes.
It never ends, Bill. You know, and listen, if you're chief of D, I had to buy a lot of technology for our detectives, and it's usually money well spent. You know, desolate and cobalt, which is a linkage thing, and it really helps you. It really is a game changer, and it's even better if the perps don't know about it. So it's so it helps a lot.
Well, you know, Chief, what could help solve the stop, question, and frisk debacle is they also have the distance X-rays that you can point it at someone that can tell you whether he's carrying a gun, but that'll never pass the civil liberties people. Yeah. They'll say, "Oh no, that's not fair." You know,
it's too invasive. Yeah, no, I've heard that. I heard that argument many times. Yeah, it's just like the like the shot spotter. I tell you, it really changed everything for us. It helped us. When I left, we were under 800 shootings for the year. I mean, I don't know where we are now, to be honest with you, but it's completely changed. We went after the gangs. That's the gangs are the ones who were shooting up the city. And once you start putting them in jail, and you go after prosecuting, that's the game changer right there as far as shootings go.
100%. You know, also, Chief, the license plate reader is a great tool. Also, I mean, just to be able to know when perps are leaving a borough, coming to another borough, terrorists, all of that stuff. It's an invaluable tool.
It is, and we put some, and we had a big problem in Coney Island, Phil. You know this. We had a lot of shoots over there, and a lot of gangs in the developments over there. We put shot spotters on those Cropsey, and I think there's only a couple ways in off the belt, and we were picking up the perps all the time. It was a real change there. Helped us reduce the shootings in Coney Island a lot. Just those things alone help you out with things. L&B, we never got him going over. We thought he was going over. He's going to flip the bridge to Verrazano. He didn't. He went to Long Island. I always thought he was a Staten Island guy until we actually found out who he was. We changed it. But that technology and in City Hall, they give you a hard time in the city council with that, but we have to have it. It keeps the city safe, especially against terrorism.
Sure.
You know, you wonder, like, what is it that they want? That they don't want the citizens of the city to be safe when every time. Look, the robot. I thought the robot was a great tool. It was a little scary looking, but they vetoed that right away.
Oh, they didn't like that dog. I remember that. So, but we always had a robot. You know, we always had that robot to go and save lives. And look what the Dallas police did with their robot. He carried an explosive that time. If you remember that case.
In Orlando.
Yes. I thought it was Dallas, but you might be wrong. I don't remember.
Orlando, they blew up the club. That was that club that the guy was shooting.
That was the Pace nightclub.
Yes. Yeah, and the robot came in and just like blew out the whole wall.
Listen, if you got a bad guy, and that's old school stuff, he's going to kill other people, then, he terminates himself by doing that, by keeping going on. That's the way I look at that. But yeah, no, these things we have to have. And, it's people doing it. Tarot, giving us information, giving us pictures. We learned in Manhattan. I don't know why anybody commits a crime in Manhattan, because if we really want to find you, we'll find you with the amount of cameras that are there. And it's and that's what it is. It's in the Comunelli case, the first case we did with the kid murdered coming out of the club. We had pictures of them putting the body in the back of a Mercedes and driving out to Jersey. We had it covered, and we had compelling evidence in that case. All these things come stick-ups on Fifth Avenue. We had a crew out of Ebbets Field one time did a stick-up in one of the. We had them in custody in an hour and a half because we had plate readers.
It's amazing. You know the girl who was killed in the Burger King in East Harlem. Same thing. I heard they tracked that shooter down into the subway all the way to Brooklyn, and they picked him up in Brooklyn.
And the dope uses EPT card at a bodega, and that's how we ID'd him. And then it's just one of those really good detective work. I'm always marvel at it, and I always will. They tell me how to break down the case, and I look at the timelines and the cadence of the investigation. And each time I see it, I just enjoy it so much, reading it, and just happy I was part of it at one time anyway.
One time we had this case in the 3-0 precinct where a 13-year-old girl was murdered by these two guys that she met on a phone party line. So you know how long ago this was. And there was video of them coming into the building, but it was really murky. And there was video of them coming out of the building. Same thing. Couldn't ID them. So the detective, being very smart, he shows them the video of them going in, and the guy goes, "Hey, that's me." And then he shows them the video of them leaving with the stuff from the burglary after they killed her, and the guy goes, "That's me too." So it was like, thanks. We couldn't have used that.
And you get that all on tape on when you interview them in the interview room, which we did too. Well, in my time, we had to outfit every detective squad in the city with a in an interview room that was all videotaped, and that helps in court as well. So and that's great when you get that spontaneous thing. It's
Dan Bibb, a former Manhattan DA, great DA, 26-year veteran. Now he's a defense attorney. He says license plate readers prove my client didn't commit a rape. So it works both ways.
Both ways, yeah.
Right.
That's good. That puts us on a different path to get the bad guy in. That's what's important.
Yeah. You know what? If you look at there was the incident, I guess it was about 3 years ago, where the terrorist drove up the sidewalk and ran over a bunch of people. They had him coming into Manhattan through the Bronx. They had the exact route that he took between traffic cameras, plate readers, and all the surveillance cameras in the city. So that technology, listen, as every day goes on, we get a little better at it. Now we're merging the lie detector test with that pupil reader, the Converse system.
Yeah.
So I mean, listen, I'll take it. If it could, maybe put us in the right direction on whether a guy did it or didn't do it. Like we just had from Dan Bibbs, license plate reader cleared his guy. Oh, that's okay. Like you said, Chief, it put us in the right direction to find the guy that did.
Yeah, that was Sayfullo Saipov was the guy who rented the truck at Home Depot and drove it. We had the whole thing staked out at that point, and he was under the wire. We didn't know who he was. I really think he was clearly radicalized. You could see as he went along. But it was a tough day, man. It was a tough day. It really was. It was. I'll never forget that one. Again, it was an FBI case, but we helped with the crime scene, and it was had to shut down the West Side Highway, to get that done.
What was there? It was 13 people killed, right?
Oh no, not that many, Bill, but there was 13 people hit. I think 8 were murdered by this guy. And it's a weirder story because as we're looking through their IDs, they were all from Argentina.
Yes, I remember that.
They were all in a high school reunion. All the guys just going down there on their bicycles, and he murdered them, brutally murdered them. And then he acted. Then he was going through ISIS. He wanted to flame out with the police, and fortunately, our cops ended that. And I don't think it's even gotten to trial yet, as far as I know. So it's just I had 3 terrorist incidents when I was chief of day that I had to work, and again, you put it on a different mindset. Same thing with hostage negotiation. You're not talking to a criminal, you're talking to a terrorist. It's a different story.
Right. Exactly. Folks, I think this show was fascinating. We started with Imette St. I think we covered every topic known to man, solved most problems in the universe, but and in only an hour and 7 minutes. Chief, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, and you're welcome to come back anytime you want to come back. The show is New York Homicide, and it's on the Oxygen Network, and they just got another season, so there's going to be some amazing shows coming up. We just like to closure to this with the Imette St. case. Darryl Littlejohn already had 25 to life, and I believe he got sentenced to a consecutive 25 to life on the Imette St. case. Is that right?
Yeah, we'll never see him again.
That's great.
Thank God.
We don't ever want to see him. But they said that about Anthony Bottoms too.
Well,
so
let's hope that as a society we finally realize that this is just pure evil, psychopath, and he's got to stay where he is.
Absolutely. Phil, final words.
Final words, Chief. Thank you so much. Good luck with the show. I say it was great, and I got a lot of feedback that it was great. A friend of mine, James O'Connell, that Bill and I know, he texted me during the show and said, "Who coined the phrase, the greatest detectives in the world?" I don't know who did, but I believe it to be true. Chief, any input on that before we go?
I wish I knew too, but I tell you what, they were 100% accurate, whoever that was, and he should get a medal. Absolutely. For saying, because it is true, and you know it is. You grab a case and you don't know which way is up, and all of a sudden, within a couple of minutes you're up and running, because you're trained, you're smart, you're savvy, and you go forward with it. And again, kudos to the detectives in the city. It's well earned, those shields.
Absolutely.
Chief, thanks again for coming on the show, folks. All you guys in the chat, thank you so much for coming by and listening to the show. This has been Police Off the Cuff for Real Crime Stories. We'll see you the next time.
Stay safe, everyone.
One episode just ain't enough.